just out of curiosity, I can definitely identify the Scottish accent. Tell me how accurate I am. I'm guessing maybe Edinburgh thereabouts.
No, you got it, 100%. Hello and welcome to Board Game Bonkers. This is the Under the Maple Light Show Season 2. I'm Jay Sears, and today's guest is George Williams, known as Loki, who's an RPG designer. Welcome, Loki.
Hey, welcome, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. It's great to have you on board. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Okay, super short form. I'm an eighth generation French Creole from New Orleans. Currently live in Cincinnati. I've been writing role playing games, mostly Pathfinder First Edition, Starfinder, Dungeon Crawl Classics, X Crawl, stuff like that for about almost 13 years now. Before that, I ran the official Planescape website, Planewalker, co-managed that for about 15 years, and we won 2 Silver Any Awards in that time period. Other than that, I'm dangerous when left unsupervised, and what supervision I have generally comes from the rare appearances of my girlfriend or the 2 furry quadrupeds in the other room.
Well, we all need some supervision at some point in our lives.
Maybe.
So I'll just explain to our viewers out there who are not perhaps familiar with the format. So we'll be presenting 9 questions to a guest and 1 scenario, of which case our guest has no idea what scenarios are, no idea which questions will be coming out, what the questions are. So will our guests thrive in the Meeple Lights, or will they be a little bit nervous? Well, we're about to find out as we present 9 questions and a scenario to our guests. So Loki, are we ready?
Bring it on.
Let's dive into question number 1. So most of these are board game related. We do have a few fluffy questions. So question number 1 is, what do you think is the most underrated board game?
I might surprise you with this because there is a healthy community of people that are heavily into it. But I think a lot of times the board game community gets all wrapped up in new and cool stuff, which as a designer I'm really into. But I really think that that's a toss up between Go and chess.
Right, okay.
Because people just kind of discount them because they're always there. But I mean, Go in particular, the permutations are endless. I think there's a lot to be said for making sure that you keep those foundational basics in rotation.
And certainly chess is a very popular game indeed, and there's actually quite a few channels on YouTube showcasing.
Well, it's not that there isn't a big chess community. It's just that as far as the general board game community and such goes, it's almost like chess is the background noise in the audioscape. It's always there, but you don't really see it in the conversations. So you'll see people talk about Small World or this or that or what is it, Adventures of Arthur, and I love seeing all of that. But like I said, I think there's a lot. I think that chess and Go and such a little bit more mainstreamed than they are with the average players. Because the people that are into chess are like people that are into jazz. They're very into it. I have one thing that puts me in mind of this is some of my students. I teach introduction to game design at the University of Cincinnati Game Lab, and I had some kids turning in some really magnificent work and discovered over the course of conversation, 4 out of the 5 of them had never played a game of chess in their lives, or Go or backgammon. The sort of foundational underpinnings. So that's sort of my response to that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, when I was brought up, I played chess. I enjoyed it. Do I love it? No, but I enjoyed it. Did play it. It actually taught me a lot in terms, it's great for the brain and thinking your strategy moves because there's so many you can think ahead. And it's a great introduction. Go, I've never tried, and I don't think I will give it a go because I think I'm absolutely smashed by other players in that game. But I started giving someone a good run for the money playing chess.
There you go. And that's the thing. I mean, you start playing around with those, and it puts you in a whole new headspace for playing with permutations on them. It's like, okay, I'm not all that interested in chess, but let's learn chess because if I learn chess, I've got the basics, and then I can learn the 3D chess, and I'm a Star Trek fan. So
Yeah, it's
foundations.
yeah, I can open the door, can't it? And I think it's good to play some classics to understand how games began and how modern games have developed from the work that's been done in the past, certainly. So we will move on to question number two now, Loki. So let's see what comes out this time. So it'll be interesting to see if we've got any chess fans. I don't know, so let us know in the comments down below if you enjoy Go or chess. So question two, do you think board game designers do enough for color-blind players?
Um, Accessibility is something that's really very important to me and very close to my heart. I've got a diagnosis late in life in my mid 50s of intense ADHD, among other things. Um, I don't know that colorblindness is something that the industry has tackled yet. I hope that it is one of the things that we'll see as the board games and RPGs and such evolve towards a more accessible style. A great example of one of the things that's in the works in that regard, and I wish I could remember the name of the project. Tim Kask, who lives here in Cincinnati, who was one of the original people. He was the first paid employee at TSR when they published D&D. Yeah, he's been around for a while, and he's working on a project that's designed to be accessible not for the colorblind, but for the blind. And it's got a card-based mechanic in it, and the cards are, from what I gather, and again, it's been a while since I talked to him about this, so I could be getting some details wrong. The cards all have QR codes and such set into the designs of the back. So when you play those cards, you pull out the smartphone, scan, and it will read the cards to you and the layout to you so that you can do that. And they're working with, I think they're also doing Braille dice and a few other things to go along with that project. So while I don't know of anything directly addressing color blindness, I do know that attempts at strides in that direction are being made, and I personally endorse them wholeheartedly. I mean, one of my favorite things in role-playing games is the fact that something's become kind of a big thing in fifth edition D&D, and that thing is the combat wheelchair, a ability to have a character. Why would you want a character in a wheelchair? For some of us, it's a cool idea. I was in a wheelchair till I was almost 14. It took 2 years of surgery to get me out of that thing. And the only clue you've got to that now that I'm 57 is that I walk with a cane. But yeah, the idea of that instantly spoke to me. And again, that's a whole nother level of accessibility. It's just providing those tools within the rules for something that there's no board, there's no cards, it's all in your head. So I hope that we will see a continual evolution towards things becoming much more accessible. Perhaps it would be worth a company exploring a smartphone based idea like having the cards read to you, but instead something that would filter and interpret the images on the cards for a colorblind user. With the technology we have today, there's all kinds of possibilities with that. I can just hope for the best and do what I can to give some boost to any of those projects I run across.
Yeah, definitely some designers who have strived to improve the way they do games for colorblind people. I actually wrote a blog post on the Pixie Games blog post site on colorblind and actually given some tips on what colors work with what colors and the color palettes help designers so that rather than going to be researching it, the information is there in that blog post. I will put the description and link and down below, sorry, the link in the description down below so you can check that out.
Oh
But
yeah.
it was interesting because looking at some games are horrendous to play for colorblind, and some are wonderfully designed and have done a great job in balancing the colours to make sure that regardless of your colorblind, which element you are, you can actually play that game. And it's fascinating the different types of colour blindness and how it can affect gameplay. So it's really interesting to see how game designers embrace that and make a conscious effort. And it's impossible to create a board game that covers every single colour blindness,
Yeah.
about doing the best you can. For example, do you need red and black? Can you perhaps change that to maybe a white instead? Because obviously white and black clashes with a certain colour blindness. So it's just being conscious of the certain colours. So I'd highly recommend for the viewers out there, game designers, to check that blog post out. I'll put the link in the description so you can have a read.
I will certainly keep track of that and add that to the list of things that I make my students read. Thank you.
So, yeah, but it is important that we continue to strive, like you said, with the evolution continues to make improvements to board games. So let's move on to our next question, number 3, Loki. Our third question is there one mechanism in game design that is currently being overused?
Um, Now, I can't speak as much to board games and such as I can to role playing games. Um, and as far as being overused, even though it's most of what I end up writing professionally, within the RPG scene, I really would like to see the rise of more of a variety of systems. Most specifically, most of the big boys on the market are based on the D20 mechanic, going back to its original Dungeons and Dragons roots. And that's great. And you can do a lot of things with it. You can do a lot of fascinating, wonderful things. I run my home games in that system. But there's no such thing as a system that is universally good at all types of storytelling. And I think that as far as tabletop role playing games and such go, you've got Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, the big ones over here, and then on the rules light end of the spectrum, you've got Savage Worlds, and then every other system just seems like it's way down the slope of the mountain behind them as far as even awareness within the gaming community. I can't think of the last time that I ran across people looking for gamers for in like the open forums and such back home in New Orleans or here in Cincinnati. You might occasionally see a cipher system game or something come up, but you wouldn't necessarily see, hey, we're playing Fate, we're playing Fiasco, we're playing Gumshoe, we're playing Boot Hill. Well, no, subtract the last one. Boot Hill's based on D20. But you see what I mean. I think that the dominance of the D20 mechanic based RPGs is a wonderful thing in one respect because it makes it easier for people to bounce from one system to another, but not so much because all these systems are perforce going to be very similar in a lot of ways because of the common mechanic.
Yeah, and a lot of people, perhaps in the tabletop space, would probably say worker placement is overused somewhat. But I think for me, I love worker placement. I like to see it evolve. And
Mhm.
actually, things work in placement. And there's a game design team, which I can't remember for the life of me, their names, and I'd probably butcher them as well. The Architects of the West Kingdom, for example, will look at different ways of doing worker placement, which is great because it keeps it fresh. And that's okay. But when
Yeah.
it's that's when it becomes a bit of a problem.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I tried to teach my students, because this is an intro class, so it's a whole bunch of kids that are, between 18 and 21. First time they're in college, first time they're doing anything like this. It's like, okay, we're going to start off. You're building a board game here. We're going to review a lot of the basic mechanics. Here's a bunch of links to go more in depth on this. You can always catch me on Zoom. Yada yada yada. And I want you to go ahead and build out your board game. You've got a week to bring me back a rough that is playable. And then they come back a week later and bring me that, and it's like, okay, this is great stuff across the board. Now you're going to learn rule number one is you're going to go into that and you are going to cut 50% off the top right now. You're going to cut this down to the bone until you've just got what's workable. You're going to put everything else in a document on the side. And then we're going to slowly start working on adding those bits in and balancing this stuff out. so that you end up with something playable. But you're not going to ever have everything you dump in there, everything you throw at the wall right off the bat. That's how you end up with cumbersome stuff. You want the minimum amount of rules possible to create the game you want and allow the players as much agency to create the experience they want within that game.
Yeah, and it's certainly a skill in itself to achieve that. So let's move on to our next question, Loki. We're on to number 4 now. Let's see what comes out the bowl. It's like dangling for fish in there. So question number 4. What type of board games do you want to see coming out in the future? It could be RPG type of games that are coming out. So what would you like to see come out?
I I have a liking for board games with creative mechanics and such. Um, I would like to see more exploration of what can be done by combining existing style board games, pieces, etc., with apps and digital technology to enhance and increase the experience. I think we're just at the dawn of that. I mean, that's the sort of interaction with games that I just dreamed about as a science fiction story as a kid in the 70s, you know? And so that's the area that's really sort of fascinating me right now is what can you do now that everybody basically has a computer, a phone, a camera, etc. in their hand all the time? How can you make use of that to evolve board games into something else new while still keeping it attached to board games and not making a full jump into things like VR?
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously a split between the community because some people love the use of AI and some don't. You know,
Well,
like,
not necessarily big on AI. AI is a 4 hour conversation.
and we're actually going to be doing a video on looking at AI in the future of board games, and we'll actually put the link in the description down below. I've actually got that video out in time, and it's quite interesting. I won't give out anything away, but it's interesting to see what concepts have come out and what concepts will be coming out with AI. But you're right, that is a different topic discussion in itself of apps itself. We've seen games like Chronicles of Crime make good use of apps. And I love the fact that you could scan around the room to look at the crime scene. I didn't agree with seconds on it, but it was fascinating. I like the use of that. However, I'm one of these people who sits on the side of I want to get away from technology and I want to engross myself in the experience of the game itself. And whilst others may think, well, actually, I love using the apps that provide, and some apps do a fantastic job of assisting games rather than playing through
Yeah.
lots of as instead I've got that information and that immersive experience through the app.
Mm.
So it can vary, can it?
Well,
Depending.
like like anything else, it's a matter of taste. You know, for instance, I personally prefer rules heavier stuff like D&D 3.5 and Pathfinder 1 for myself. That's all a matter of taste. If everybody liked the same things, it would be a useless world. We'd all be bored to tears. You know that. But please don't ever get me wrong. I don't criticize rules light and such. It's just my thing. I think it's awesome. It's bringing people to the table and they're having a blast playing games. Because when it comes to edition wars and things like that, my stance is a simple one. They're stupid. The only perfect game is the one that works beautifully for you at your table with your particular game group. Everything else doesn't matter.
Absolutely. Diversity is key. So let's move on to our 5th question. Here we go, number 5. So, what or which one board game could you not live without? So, if you've got a particular board game you adore so much, or even an RPG game you couldn't possibly live without?
That I could or could not.
Could not.
Couldn't. Uh, if it came down to brass tacks in an unreasonable universe, I would have to say that would come down to first edition Pathfinder. Most efficient toolkit for my style of dungeon mastering that's been done so far.
And it's certainly well received from the community. By far one of the most popular, isn't it?
It's been big. Pathfinder Second Edition is taking the world by storm, but there's still a lot of people putting out Pathfinder One compatible. I'm actually getting ready to pitch a couple of publishers on a few pieces. I know Legendary Games, who I've done a lot of Starfinder work for in the past, is continuing to put out more support because they know there are a lot of us out there still playing it.
Yeah,
And that, as a side note, that's one thing that I love about the modern age is yeah, the editions are going to move on. That's always going to happen. I've been playing since White Box. I've seen every changeover that's been. But the fact that now, with the fact that you can create comparatively inexpensive publications on PDF and such, and you've got the internet for communication and sales, unlike prior generations, we've now got continuing support for the old games, and you can keep playing whatever it is you want, and that's beautiful. I love that. I really do. It's just a terrific thing.
and certainly, yeah, the more choice, people love choice as well, and have being able to choose what they want to play. So let's move on to our sixth question, Lockie, and let's see what comes out this time. Fighting with the fish in that bowl there. Question number six. What's the most unique convention you've ever attended or participated in?
Oh my! Now that's most unique convention. I would have to say that that would probably be going back to which one was that would be going back to CoastCon in Biloxi, Mississippi, down on the Gulf Coast, back in the '80s. At that point, you had it was one of the old pre-internet days, so you couldn't go out and buy weird, strange, old stuff online. You had to go to conventions and go to the dealer's room and see if somebody had the bootleg script or whatever else. And so half of the convention was filled with geeks and gamers and everything else. Huge game room. Greg Kostikian, who worked on GURPS and a number of other things, was there as a guest. But what made it absolutely hilarious was the entire other half of the arena was filled with a Van Halen show and all of its fans. And this is down getting into almost Florida type territory, all literally on the beach in Mississippi. It was quite an experience. I had an absolute blast. I think if I remember correctly, that was the year that they did a sneak preview for the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai a couple of months before it was supposed to come out.
I wonder if there's any pictures kicking around. If there are, we'll put them on the screen for people to check out.
None of my photos survived Hurricane Katrina, so sadly I don't really have anything prior to 2005. But CoastCon's easy to look up online. The convention's still going, unlike a lot of others that have risen and fall since then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure people will be checking it out. It sounds absolutely fascinating. So let's move on to our next question, Lockie. We're on to question number seven.
Nice, lucky seven.
And we're doing well. So question seven is, what's something you want to get better at?
Oh, what is something that I want to get better at? That's a two-sided coin. On the one side, um, I want to get better. I want to get better at building games and building rules. It's kind of I've often drawn a comparison to it because I'm a musician to playing guitar. You're never there. There's always more to learn, more room to develop. On the practical side, if I was going to get better at anything, well, the game industry will eat you alive, and it doesn't pay enough to pay any of the bills, quite honestly, for the vast majority of people working in it. If I had to approach it from a practical side, I'd say I wish I was better at actually selling my services because I'm great at all that sort of thing until it comes down to selling myself, and then I just kind of don't.
Well, there's certainly people can look at a portfolio, can't they, and see
Oh, yeah.
some that's been released to say, well, actually, this person offers a lot of value. And you're right, it's about how you sell yourself as well, isn't it? If you want to progress. And you're right, a lot of people actually don't make enough money to have a living in the board game industry, but those who do, and they are very truthful as well, saying how lucky they are.
Mhm. Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's I've got a lot of friends at Paizo, and a lot of friends over at Wizards of the Coast. Many of them who just joined the team about a year or so ago, and yeah, I mean for the folks who can, it's great. But looking at what the industry pays and the part of the country you got to live in to do a lot of that. Yeah, like for instance, Paizo, they do allow people to do remote work and join the team from out of state, but because of the way the tax laws and others such are all put together, and I don't even begin to understand the details of all that, there are only 4 states out of the 50 that you can live in and actually legally be able to apply and get the work. So a lot of times, like any freelance work, it's like running a marathon. You're jumping over obstacles and others such as you run through, and hopefully you'll catch the ball, get the big gig, get something out there, and somebody will say something nice about it, and you'll get to pay the electric bill that month. I mean, for me, I I do enjoy paying the bills, but honestly, the really biggest thing is knowing people have had fun with the stuff that I've built. Yet I don't care if they know my name or anything. When I was in a tour guide in New Orleans, I actually had a guest from somewhere out in the West Coast show up, young lady of college age, had a big old D20 patch on the jacket. Oh, you're a gamer. And we start chit chatting. He's like, oh, what have you done? It's like, well, I did this and this and this. And Palace of the Lich Queen. She's like, oh my God, that's you. I'm running that. And I was just walking on air for like the next 3 days. That unexpected. Oh wow, somebody recognized me. And people don't realize. Most of us doing the design work and other such, we're just average, typical people like you. I mean, I got kind of starstruck when I met Monty Cook.
Yeah, and everyone I've actually, brought onto the show has been so genuine, and you're right. They're normal people, like anyone out there, and I'm just so grateful that no one's big-headed. They're very genuine, and I think that's fantastic about this board game, and long may it continue. So let's move on to our next question, Lockie. We're on to question number 8. So
Right?
we've got 2 more questions before we go on to our scenario. So question 8 is, what would you be doing instead of you wearing, creating or designing board games or your RPG games? What would you do instead?
Um, if I wasn't doing this, backed up with a lot of corporate copywriting and such, and I had my choice, um, I might be getting a little old and creaky for it, but there's a good chance I'd go back to working in music. And I used to work with House of Blues. I've had the pleasure of working shows from Eric Clapton and Nine Inch Nails to George Clinton's 50th birthday party. And it eats you alive and takes a lot out of you, physically, and just being on a completely different schedule from anybody else. But damn, that was fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, and yeah, I wouldn't play my music as I've produced. It'd probably give you a heart attack. But
You'd be surprised. I listen to all sorts of stuff.
it gives you a buzz, doesn't it? If you're a musician or DJing or playing in a band, and playing in front of people who appreciate what you do, it can just be a vibe that you get from it.
Oh yeah, and if I may extend the parallel a little bit, and I've brought this up. For instance, Brendan LaSalle, who created X-Crawl, he and I have worked on a few things together, including an X-Crawl adventure, and we, a lot of time we'll get Zoom up and running with live Google Doc while we're doing it, and just it's very much exactly the feel of just a jam session where you're really getting in sync with the other guitarist, and it's a beautiful thing, and it births ideas and perspectives and mechanics you'd never come up with by yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely, and collaboration can bring some new dimensions to design. Absolutely. So yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And let's move on to our final question, which is question number 9. And
All
let's
right.
see what it's about. So I haven't had too many fluffy. Most have been quite tough ones. And our ninth question is, what's your top 3 favorite board game mechanisms, or you could talk about your RPG mechanism. What do you
Okay. So as far as favorite mechanisms, all right. So in no order in relation to each other. Uh, Despite the fact that it's not a game I play at my home table a lot, I'm very fond of the advantage disadvantage mechanic in fifth edition D&D, where you roll a pair of 20-sided die instead of one. If you have advantage, you keep the high number. If you have a disadvantage, you keep the low number. This allows you to drastically reduce static bonuses, like, oh, you get another +1 every level and things like that, allowing for some much more theatrical moments, but overall, I think also sort of evening out advancement over the level progression. And it is something that I have gleefully stolen and used in particular instances in my Pathfinder table and other such. My second favorite one, oddly enough, also is diving into fifth edition D&D, a variant of it. One of the companies that I do freelance work for, both as a game master and as a designer, is called Gripner, Gipnr. And so with Gripner, it's the game is based on fifth edition D&D, but our lead designer Stephen Radney McFarland, he wrote the Dungeon Master's Guide for fourth edition. Okay. Did a lot of redesign work to make it a little grittier, a little more useful, a little smoother. And one of my favorite things is the way that magic is handled. Because in almost all of your games, it's what they call a Vancian magic system. You have X number of spells that you know, you have X number of slots of each level with which to cast them. You cast it, you don't know it anymore until you rest, etc. He removed that. Now, every spell of every level, you can just spam all day. It's got an effect no matter what. And the way to make that work and balance out over the levels is he created what we call a sacrifice mechanic. And so let's use a common example, magic missile. So you can sit here and just magic missile automatically to hits, automatically does 1d4 damage. You can do that on your attack all day long. But you get backed up into a corner, and that Yuan Ti is rising up above you, getting to take a chomp out of your throat with the fangs dripping poison. You sacrifice that magic missile. You can't use it again for the rest of the day, just like in the old Vancian system, until you rest. But this time it does 3d4 damage instead of 1. So he took what's been a standard for D&D since the first edition came out on how magic works, and made it a lot more cinematic, gave it a lot more punch, and also brought it much more into balance with the other classes at the same time. So that revamp of spells for that, when I was running games for them at GaryCon, I had a lot of people tell me, look, I'm stealing this idea for Pathfinder, for 13th Age, for my 5e game, across the board. So evidently it's not just me. But that's my second favorite. And top of the list, introduced in third edition Dungeons and Dragons, is feats, which are things you get every few levels that allow a extra amount of customization. So say for instance, you can take the amateur gunslinger's feat, and that allows you to use firearms as well as whatever swords and such your class has, and also allows you to do gunsmithing to make your own bullets and such, because it assumes a more primitive type of setting. So feats is an additional way to make sure that this fighter is not just like this fighter, this sorcerer is not just like this sorcerer. That is probably my favorite innovation since the 80s as far as game mechanics go.
Fantastic, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see if our viewers know much about those mechanisms that are used in those games.
The magic stuff that I talked about can be found as a free PDF download, actually, on the glimmering.com and the resources page.
Fantastic, and we'll put the link in the description there below so people can check that out.
Outstanding.
That moves us on to our final piece of the show. Is which we'll be taking from this. So we'll
Okay.
one, and let's just, oh, we'll pick this middle one here. There we go. We've got it here. So let's see what our scenario is. Now, this will be interesting. So, actually, we touched on this earlier. So, AI has taken over, and nearly all the board games are being redesigned and manufactured by an AI. Artists have lost their jobs, or golden designers have retired as a result. How do you embrace this?
Um, I would embrace this in as viscerally a combative fashion as I could manage to muster, attempting to mobilize as many people on my side of the equation as possible. AI has no place in the creative industry. It is a tool. If you use it to start taking away jobs, as I've already seen, as it has impacted more than 75% of the copywriting business that actually pays my bills so I can design games. AI should be for the marketing department. AI should be handling the accounting and such. AI should be useful as a tool for artists to play with ideas on the side. It should have absolutely nothing to do with the direct generation of the games. It should. I can see that being a good thing if it were simply revamping the trade dress, make the boards look different and such. But if it's to the point of creating games and such, that's not art. That's a reduction to the lowest common denominator of what has been farmed from scanning across the web for what everybody else wants out there. And that's not how you get anything resembling a creative game, movie, book, or record album. God, I'm showing my age. I just said record album. It is. Well, I'm going to try to be as polite and concise on that one as I can. Um, it's a tool. It should be used as a tool. And there are arguments that are definitely have a lot of validity to them that in a much more limited sense it's been used as a tool for a while because you're talking about the same sort of tech that underlies grammar check and spell check. But it's not innately good or evil on its own. We're in the dawn of the technology right now, and this is where we get set in stone how we deal with the technology, what the legal frameworks for the technology are. Um, the bottom line is there are a few of us out there that are insanely fortunate enough to do something that we love and that in a way gives back to the fun quotient of the world and actually can sometimes pay off a bill, pay off the rent doing it. Um, think about how many of your games won't exist anymore if it's all reduced down to the pablum of the lowest common denominator. What are the big blockbuster things that go against the conventional wisdom? Yeah. Well, how do you get something amazing and creative? You don't get it from an AI averaging out the 4 billion and 6 entries on whatever it was that it picked up across the web. It hasn't got the spark of creativity to it, and that's the problem, and that's where I believe we're at the beginning of a battle that must be fought. Um, and I do think that the people who completely demonize it are also in the wrong because a lot like blockchain technology, and I'm not a big fan of the NFT stuff. This is technology that is not going anywhere. So we need to set the stage and start taking the right steps in the beginning for how it's going to be integrated into what we do. If AI can take me out and get me from point A to point B in a strange city and act as a real-time translator when I'm in Bangkok because like most Americans I'm sadly monolingual, that's awesome. If AI takes away my ability to put food on the table, that's not awesome. It's really
Yeah.
very simple.
In the concept that it's a tool that can be useful, but also it's about how people use it, and that's important, and about what is it used for, because that's what can make something dangerous and
Oh yeah.
non-dangerous.
Oh, and
So
especially right now, coming to you from the United States, I'm sure all of my friends across the pond are aware of what a cesspool of disinformation and ridiculous extremism our nation has become over here, particularly since the Orange Menace had his little term in office. So yeah, the specter of completely unfettered AI, when there are a lot of people that stand to gain and make a lot of other people lose really badly in an already well-established media-based disinformation system like we get from the far right. Yeah, it's something we need to get on now. It is vitally important, and that's not just a yeah me putting food on the table. That's a matter of long-term global stability, pure and simple.
well, I'm sure it'll spark a lot of debate in the community as the years go on and AI develops. Well,
Yep.
that brings us to the end of the show, Loki. I would like to thank you for joining us, and for our viewers as well, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to the channel so more videos like this can pop up on your stream, and also consider liking the video and leaving comments down below. Let us know your thoughts on today's show. It'll be interesting to hear from you viewers out there and what you think, as you want to create a bit of a community on this channel. So that's it all for now. My name's JC. Until next time, take care.